The air was cool enough to sting his lungs in the best way, the kind of morning breeze you only get near the cliffs above Malibu. Malcolm Hayes slowed his jog as the road curved toward the main gate of his neighbourhood. His shirt was damp, his breathing steady, and in his mind, all that waited ahead was a glass of water and a hot shower. He'd been doing this same route for years, down the winding streets, past the bougainvillea, up to the stone arch that marked home. But today, someone new was standing there. She was dressed like she'd stepped out of a high-end catalogue, white blazer dress, polished hair, heels clicking against the pavement even though it was barely past sunrise. One hand rested on the control panel, the other on her hip. Her eyes swept over Malcolm like she was scanning a stranger on the sidewalk. "Residents use the side gate," she said, her voice crisp, the words clipped as if she'd rehearsed them. "This entrance is closed for deliveries." Malcolm slowed to a stop a few feet from her, still catching his breath. He wasn't carrying a wallet, no car key fob in his hand, just a man in running shoes and a t-shirt, looking at the place he'd built stone by stone. "I'm not a delivery," he said evenly. "I live here." The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite disbelief, but somewhere in between. "You'll need to use the visitors' lane down the hill," she replied. She didn't move, neither did he. From behind Malcolm, the rumble of a delivery van came up the street. The driver slowed when he saw them, his head tilting just enough to show he'd caught the tension. His phone came out of his pocket almost instinctively. It wasn't the first time Malcolm had been told he didn't belong somewhere he had every right to be. But standing there, sweat cooling on his skin, he realised something. This was the first time it was happening, at his own front gate. Malcolm stayed where he was, the stone arch casting a long shadow across his feet. The woman at the panel, he caught her name on the small badge clipped to her blazer, Chloe Grant, security manager. She didn't glance at the nameplate on the gatepost, the one with his family crest etched in bronze. She didn't ask a single question. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back from the sensor," she said, her tone calm but flat. "Unauthorized activation will trigger an incident report." Malcolm's eyes flicked toward the black metal gate, tall and still, the kind of thing most people would think twice about challenging. But he wasn't most people here. He'd walked through this entrance more times than he could count, sometimes in a tailored suit, sometimes in old jeans after a day in his workshop. "I told you," he said quietly, "I live here." Chloe didn't blink. "Without identification, you'll need to enter through the visitors' lane, down the hill, past the guard shack." It wasn't just the words, it was the unspoken calculation in her eyes, assessing his clothes, his sweat, his empty hands, deciding what that meant. From the corner of his eye, Malcolm saw the delivery driver shift in his seat, phone angled toward them. The driver wasn't saying anything, but his eyebrows were raised like he already knew where this was headed. Malcolm stepped forward until the motion sensor clicked. A soft buzz came from the gate, followed by a red light flashing once. Access denied. Chloe's brows arched slightly. "Sir, I'm asking you again to step back." He met her gaze, steady as if they had all the time in the world. "Do you always talk to residents this way?" he asked, "or just the ones who aren't dressed for brunch?" Her lips pressed together, but she didn't answer. Instead, she tapped the radio clipped to her hip. "Unit 4, respond to the main gate. Possible impersonator. No ID. Refusing to comply." Somewhere inside, Malcolm felt that familiar tightening in his chest. Not fear, but the sharp edge of being dismissed before being seen. He'd felt it in boardrooms, in lobbies, on sidewalks where strangers clutched their bags. But never here. Never at the front door of the house he built. And this time he wasn't planning on walking away. The sound of footsteps came from inside the gate. 2 more security officers in dark vests making their way over. One of them was still sipping coffee from a stainless travel mug, the other scrolling through something on a small tablet. They slowed when they saw Malcolm standing there, sweat drying on his shirt, Chloe planted between him and the control panel. "What's going on?" the one with the coffee asked. Chloe didn't look at him. "Possible impersonator," she said, her voice clipped. "Claims to live here, no ID, not compliant." The younger guard glanced at Malcolm, his brow furrowing. "We could just ask his name." "We're still verifying," Chloe cut in quickly. Her tone was firm, the kind that warned everyone else to fall in line. Malcolm let out a slow breath. "I don't need to prove who I am to someone who's already decided I don't belong here." His voice was steady, not raised, but it carried enough weight to make the younger guard shift his feet. Behind Malcolm, the delivery driver finally leaned out his window. "I've dropped packages here before," he said, loud enough for the group to hear. "That's Mr. Hayes, right?" Chloe snapped her head toward him. "Sir, please stay out of this." But it was too late. The name was out there now, floating in the air like it had its own gravity. A couple of early morning dog walkers slowed as they passed, catching pieces of the exchange. One of them pulled out a phone. The gate remained still, the red light above the sensor glowing faintly. And for a moment, it felt like the whole street was holding its breath, watching to see what would happen next. Malcolm's gaze didn't waver. He'd been underestimated before, but never with his own front steps just beyond arm's reach. This wasn't just about getting through the gate anymore. It was about the principle of standing there, not backing down, while the truth made its way into the open. Malcolm reached into the small zipper pocket sewn into the side of his running shorts. His fingers closed around his phone, the screen cracked in one corner from a drop months ago. Without another word to Chloe, he tapped a single contact. "Carla," he said when the call connected, his voice calm enough to sound like he was asking about the weather. "Initiate homeowner verification, main gate, now." On the other end, his assistant's tone was crisp and certain. "Understood, Mr. Hayes. Activating override." A faint chime came from the control panel beside Chloe, followed by the deep, even voice of the community's automated system echoing through a speaker above the gate. "Access confirmed. Malcolm Hayes, primary resident, lot 42. Welcome home." It was only a sentence, but it landed hard. The younger guard glanced at Chloe. The man with the coffee took a half step back. The delivery driver muttered, "Told you," under his breath. But the gate didn't swing open. Chloe's hand stayed firmly planted on the panel, and the lock remained in place. She was holding it shut on purpose. "That's not enough," she said quickly. "Overrides can be faked. Until I clear it personally, you're not walking in." From the sidewalk, one of the dog walkers spoke up. "Are you serious? The system just said his name." Another neighbour, a middle-aged woman leaning out the driver's side of a parked SUV, called over, "He's lived here for years. Everyone knows him." The light above the panel kept flashing green, a constant reminder that the system was ready to open. But the only thing keeping it closed was the person standing in front of it. Malcolm's gaze stayed on Chloe, steady and unblinking. "You think the gate gives you control," he said softly, "but all it does is show who you really are when someone you don't expect walks up to it." Her expression didn't change, but something in the set of her shoulders did. A barely noticeable falter, the first crack in a wall she'd been building since the moment he arrived. The neighbourhood was waking up now. A couple of cyclists slowed to a stop just beyond the gate, resting one foot on the curb while watching the standoff. A jogger with earbuds pulled one out, scanning between Malcolm and the security team as if deciding whether to speak. Chloe adjusted her stance, one heel slightly forward, both hands now resting on the edge of the panel. "Until I can verify through my channels," she said, "you're not passing this point." Malcolm didn't raise his voice. "You just heard the system confirm me." Her eyes narrowed. "Systems can be wrong." The woman in the parked SUV leaned out again, her voice carrying more weight this time. "Chloe, I've lived here for 15 years. That man has been here longer than you've had this job." The younger guard shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Malcolm, then back at Chloe. "If the system says it's him and the residents recognise him..." His words trailed off under her sharp look. From behind Malcolm, the delivery driver finally spoke louder, addressing no one in particular. "So what's this about then? Because it sure doesn't sound like it's about a gate anymore." A few heads turned at that. The jogger stepped closer. "He runs this road almost every morning. You ever see him cause trouble?" she asked the guards. No one answered. The green light on this panel stayed steady, waiting. The hum of the unlocked gate was the only sound for a few long seconds. Malcolm stayed still, hands relaxed at his sides as if the timing was his to control. Inside, he could feel the weight of every time he'd been questioned in places he had every right to be. Boardrooms, conferences, even restaurants where the host had looked past him to greet someone else. This wasn't the first time, but standing here, with neighbours watching and phones recording, it might be the first time people saw it happen as plainly as this, and he wasn't about to let that moment slip away. Malcolm's eyes stayed on Chloe, but his mind drifted for just a moment, back to a winter afternoon on the south side of Chicago. He'd been in 7th grade, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too big that he'd borrowed from his cousin. His science teacher had encouraged him to attend a student expo downtown, a big deal for kids like him. He remembered stepping into the lobby of a tall glass building, marvelling at the marble floors and the way voices echoed off the high ceiling. He didn't get far before a security guard, older, white, with a bored look, waved him back toward the door. "You don't belong in here, kid," the man had said, not asking his name, not asking why he was there, just deciding. Malcolm had stepped outside into the cold without saying a word. He'd kept his hands in his pockets so no one would see them shaking. And for years, every time he was dismissed or underestimated, that same cold crept back in. Now, standing at his own gate, with the ocean breeze replacing that winter chill, he realised something. This was the same scene, just a different stage. Same doubt, same assumption, only this time, he wasn't a boy with no voice. He looked back at Chloe, his tone calm but unshakable. "You're making the same mistake that guard made when I was 13, he said quietly, "and you don't even know it." The younger officer's eyes flickered with something, maybe curiosity, maybe guilt. The woman in the SUV folded her arms, leaning on the open window as if to say she'd seen enough. The delivery driver adjusted his phone, framing the shot wider. Malcolm wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. The story was writing itself in front of an audience, and every second Chloe doubled down, more people decided where they stood. And Malcolm knew this wasn't just about walking through a gate. It was about never letting that 7th grade moment repeat itself. Malcolm took a slow step forward, not enough to threaten, just enough to make it clear he wasn't backing away. His voice was steady, almost conversational. "Chloe, you don't have to like me, but you do have to respect the fact that this is my home." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed in his hand. He answered without looking away from her. "Carla," he said, "activate a full compliance log for this gate. Make it visible to the homeowners board right now." On the other end, his assistant's voice was calm and efficient. "Done. They're watching the feed as we speak, Mr. Hayes." That single sentence shifted the air. The younger guard's posture straightened. The one with the coffee lowered his cup. Even the cyclists on the sidewalk exchanged glances. Chloe's fingers tightened on the panel, but for the first time, she glanced over her shoulder at the green light still glowing above the gate. From the street, the woman in the SUV called out, "She's digging herself in deeper. Let him through." The delivery driver added, "Everyone here's got a phone. This is going to be all over the neighbourhood app in 10 minutes. Malcolm didn't raise an eyebrow. "You can keep blocking me," he said quietly, "but every second you do, more people are going to see exactly how you treat a resident whose only crime was wearing the wrong shirt." There was no malice in his tone, just truth laid bare. And that truth was starting to spread. 2 more neighbours had stopped on the sidewalk, whispering to each other. The jogger who'd been watching earlier now stood beside the cyclists, arms crossed, eyes on Chloe. The balance was shifting, and everyone could feel it. The hum of the motor was faint at first, just enough for Malcolm to hear it before anyone else. Then the green light above the gate pulsed twice, and the lock clicked open with a clean mechanical snap. The sound carried farther than it should have, cutting through the quiet like a small verdict. Malcolm didn't rush. He stood still for a few seconds, letting the moment breathe. Neighbours leaned in from the sidewalk. The cyclists put their feet down. The delivery driver angled his phone higher. Chloe's eyes darted to the panel, as if hoping the system had made a mistake she could still correct. It hadn't. Malcolm finally took a step forward. His pace was unhurried, his posture relaxed, but his presence filled the space like someone walking into their own living room. As he passed the threshold, the sunlight caught the faint sheen of sweat on his jaw, and for the first time that morning, he allowed himself the smallest breath of relief. He didn't look back right away. Only when his shoes touched the smooth stone inside the gate did he turn, his gaze sweeping over Chloe and the 2 guards behind her. "You see," he said quietly, "the gate was never yours to control." Chloe's jaw tightened, but she didn't move. The younger guard glanced at her, then at Malcolm, as if weighing which side of the fence he wanted to stand on, not just physically, but in principle. From the street, the woman in the SUV muttered to no one in particular, "That's how you walk through a door you already own." A few people nodded. One of the cyclists let out a single, slow clap. Malcolm didn't acknowledge it. He simply turned back toward the driveway, heading toward the front steps of his home. But everyone watching could feel it. This wasn't over yet. The air still carried the tension of a story waiting for its final lines. Malcolm had barely stepped onto the smooth stone of his driveway when Chloe's voice cut through the air behind him. "Mr. Hayes, wait." He slowed, turning just enough to see her but not enough to give her the ground she wanted. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she left the panel, holding herself tall like she was still in charge. "This was a misunderstanding," she said, forcing a polite tone. "Our procedures are in place for a reason. We've had incidents, people sneaking in, falsifying access. I was just following protocol." Malcolm let the words hang there. "Did I sneak in?" he asked. She hesitated. "No, but..." "Did I lie about who I am?" he continued. Her mouth opened, then closed. "Then what exactly did you follow?" His voice wasn't sharp, but it cut just the same. "Because from where I'm standing, you didn't start with protocol, you started with an assumption." The younger guard shifted his weight, glancing down at his boots. The man with the coffee studied the panel like it might offer him an escape from having to speak. On the sidewalk, a few of the neighbours nodded almost instinctively, as if they'd been in Malcolm's position before, in their own way. Chloe's lips pressed into a thin line. "I didn't know who you were," she said finally. Malcolm gave a slow nod. "That was the problem," he said. "You didn't want to know." The air between them was still. No raised voices, no commotion, just the kind of quiet that comes when the truth lands harder than anything shouted. Without another word, Malcolm turned and continued toward the wide steps of his home, leaving her at the gate with the weight of what had just happened. The front door swung shut with a soft click, sealing out the morning noise. Inside, the air was cool, still, and smelled faintly of cedar from the polished floors. Malcolm stood in the foyer for a moment, letting the quiet settle into him. No voices, no questions, just home. Above the curved staircase hung a black and white portrait of his mother. She wore her Sunday dress, one hand resting on a Bible, the other on her hip, her gaze steady as if she could see through time. She'd never been allowed inside many of the buildings he now owned. That picture hung here for a reason, to remind him why he built what he built. He walked past the framed photos lining the hallway, the ribbon cutting of his first office, his daughter's college graduation, his son's first patent. Each image was proof of a life earned piece by piece, not handed over. In his study, sunlight poured across a worn leather notebook on the desk. Malcolm opened it to the first page, where his younger handwriting had scrawled a line years ago. "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what they can't take from you while you're still here." He read it twice, then spoke aloud, as if to someone standing just behind him. "If they question whether you belong, stand there long enough for the truth to catch up." Outside, he could still see a few neighbours lingering beyond the gate, talking quietly. The delivery van was gone, but he knew the video was already making its way through group chats and community boards. He didn't need to control that part. The story would tell itself. Malcolm closed the notebook and rested his palm on the cover. "Presence is power," he said softly, "and you don't need permission to walk in your own door." Then he leaned back in his chair, breathing in the stillness, knowing that somewhere out there, the morning's lesson would outlast the moment itself. Not because of the gate or the green light, but because he hadn't moved until the truth did. Lesson learned. Never judge someone by appearances alone. Respect and a person's right to belong aren't defined by what they wear or the status you assume they have, but by the truth and how they stand their ground. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. I truly appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one, here on Rain Inside.